The purpose of this particular forum is to gather information about people's feelings about transportation, or mobility as they're calling it, in north end of the county. Our guest of honor this evening is Thera Black. The county is hired to gather that information and to provide it to them so that they can make intelligent decisions about transportation in the future. Thera will explain briefly what she's doing and what she'd like to learn from you about your feelings on transportation. Her presentation will be followed by questions and comments from the audience, which will be moderated by Chris from the North Mason Chamber. The forum is being recorded by Dietrich from Mason Web TV, and the videos will be on his website at masonwebtv.com. To allow everyone to speak who wants to speak, we will limit comments or questions to 2 minutes, one issue, please. If time allows, once everybody has had a chance to speak once, then we'll continue with the questioning. When Chris calls on you, please wait for the roving microphone. Our roving microphone, please hold up your hand. Okay. We'd like to get your question recorded on Mason Web TV, and that requires the mic. The only other request is that your comments be civil. It's okay to disagree, but we have to disagree agreeably. We're not here to argue or harass, so please be nice. There will also be up at the commissioners meeting tomorrow at 6 o'clock, giving a presentation. That will be in the North Mason School District boardroom. Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to you, Chris. Want to use that mic? Yeah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Klessman. I'll be your moderator tonight. Like you'd heard, we have a small presentation, then we'll have a chance for open questions and comments. This is really exciting. Thank you guys all for being here. It's pretty awesome to see this many people show up. And remember, we're looking forward to the next few years from now having a bypass come in that's going to really dynamically change the area of Belfair. And what we're going to go through tonight is different questions and thoughts on how we want our town to change, right? There's going to be a lot of things that change being that main farrow through with the Highway 3. So the outlook and the idea, and this is how it really becomes something that's ours, not something that's done to us as a community. So when we have that opportunity, like I said, we'll keep your comments, please, or questions to about 2 minutes, and I'll be watching to see who the next person is for a comment as we pass the mic along. But thank you very much for your attention, and please, Thera Black.
Thank you, and thank you. What a wonderful. When we were driving up here, I'm looking at what a gorgeous evening it is. It's like, oh, there's not going to be anybody here. And so what a delight to get to be here and have so many people turn out on a beautiful night like this. So my name is Thera Black, and it's spelled T-H-E-R-A, so if you thought you heard me lisp, but it's just an odd family name, and so bear with that. And I work for a small company called SCJ Alliance, which is a small engineering and planning firm over in Lacey. And we have been contracted, as Lee said, we've been contracted by Mason County to help figure out what the next step is in the Belfair Mobility Plan. And I thought Lee might suggest that it's not all about the Belfair bypass tonight. I know that that's going to come up in the question, but and I can answer some of those questions tonight, but those are really state DOT questions, and this is really about what happens to Mason County's transportation system and how Mason County's transportation system fits in with that state system and how the state system needs to serve the Belfair community to the best of its ability. So I'll just go ahead and let you know I won't have all the Belfair bypass answers that you want, but I might have a surprising amount of information for you. I'll also let you know before we get started that I will be shocked if I don't get questions tonight that are either things that I just don't know the answers to yet, or questions that maybe are outside of the scope of work that we've been contracted to do with Mason County. And so we want to respond to all the questions. The questions that I don't have answers to, that are sort of within our purview to be working on, I will get those answers. And I talked with Lee, and we will be able to get that information back out to you so that you can get sort of a composite list of everything that was asked and the responses to them, even if I don't have the answer for you tonight. The other thing I'll let you know is that if questions pop up, if it's about the Belfair bypass that's beyond what I can answer, or something else that's outside of transportation and mobility in the Belfair area, we'll get those questions to the right people. And I can't promise how those people will deal with them, but we will do our best to get those questions into the hands of people so we can get responses for you. Finally, the last thing I'll say before I get started is we have a handout when you came in. What we're expecting is that at the end of the night, you're going to take this piece with you, and you're going to leave this piece for us. And on this piece, we're sort of interested in your perception of Belfair today. We're going to talk in a bit here about how Belfair planned to get to, for its future, and now we've taken a couple of big steps into that future. So what are those next steps we take? So we're looking for some information from you about what you think of as sort of the downtown core and how easy it is to get around and all of that. But on the back, there's a lot of room in case you think of something, maybe you're not comfortable asking a question in public, or we're running out of time. If you get your questions written down here and turn this in, we will also respond to these as well. So I wanted to let you know why you got this and why it's in 2 pages and why we are hoping that we'll get this back from you. So I'll go ahead and get started. What we're going to do tonight, it's really important as we kick off this process that the community is involved. And I'll say that my marching orders that I got from the Public Works Department with Mason County, as well as the county commissioners, is that this should be an inclusive process, and that everybody should have a chance to be involved right from the get-go, which is why I'm here tonight, even if I don't have a lot of specific plans or ideas for you. We wanted to bring you in at the beginning of the process. So that's why we're here tonight to do this. And the point is to start getting an understanding of the issues as you see them, the opportunities that you see, your aspirations for the community, so that we can try to the best of our ability to develop a plan that moves those community priorities forward. And then also, just it's a great opportunity to understand what kind of questions you have, the issues that are on your mind. So most of this will be turned over to a sort of a give and take exchange after I get through with all of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some background. I'm going to be a little bit of a talking head for a bit, and give you some background on the context. We're not starting from scratch with this, so how do we get to this place where we're at with the local transportation system, with the state transportation system? I want you to understand the way we're approaching our work, the kind of considerations that we're giving to some key factors that are, you cannot think about transportation in Belfair without thinking about these factors, and explain to you a little bit about how we intend to approach our analysis and the type of recommendations that we're going to make, and the schedule, and how we expect to be involving you all the way through. I'll tell you right up front, I don't think we're going to have a whole lot of meetings like this because it's hard in people's schedules to get together. But we are going to have lots of opportunities for engagement, which we'll talk about. Once we get through with that, so that everybody's sort of on the same playing field and the same background of understanding, we'll sort of open it up and it can be just free flow in terms of questions and comments and observations. So we are developing a mobility plan for Belfair, and so it's transportation. And what are we trying to do in that? And so I'll say right up front, we're trying to find 1 or 2 feasible connections between SR3 and the Belfair bypass. And we're going to talk about that in more detail, about what does that mean to have a feasible connection. But by state law, with this limited access highway, we will be allowed to have up to 2 connections. And so I want to talk through those considerations, what we'll be looking at, but that is a really important objective of the Belfair Mobility Plan. We also want to improve circulation and access on the local system. And so this is what happens with Mason County, with the local streets and roads, and how do they work, and how have things changed now? Maybe the traffic patterns might be shifting a little bit with the improvements on SR3. So it's important to go in and update those so that we can figure out the best opportunities to complete a bit of a grid and provide a little bit more connectivity for people in a very environmentally constrained and topographically constrained environment. We have some outstanding mobility issues. I've just in the time that I've spent out in Belfair, I still see some intersections that don't seem to work quite right. We have been out here while there's been construction going on, but I'm curious from your vantage points, how are you seeing traffic patterns change? And we want very much for the bypass to bring everything that's good for Belfair and not have negative consequences. And so the Belfair Mobility Plan is going to have something of a business district strategy. It's really important to Mason County that when the bypass opens up, that it's not a detriment to the local business community. So SQUIM mastered it beautifully. And for those of you who remember when 101 went right through SQUIM, when that moved out, it didn't diminish the quality of the local economic environment in SQUIM, and in fact, I think some would argue that it got better. And so we want to talk about that in this plan and figure out how do we make sure that when the bypass opens up, that businesses in Belfair thrive and continue to do really well and don't lose business because everybody's bypassing Belfair. We want to enhance walkability. We're hearing this more and more. The sidewalks on SR3 were a good start, but people want to have an opportunity to walk more places. And so that's one of the things that we'll be looking at. And I've already gotten input from several people saying we ought to be looking at how do we connect our trail systems better and how can we connect our trails to our sidewalks. So that's one of the things that we'll be doing in this study. I want to be really clear, and I know that there have been issues in the past. We get it that Belfair has a lot of wetlands, a lot of really sensitive environmental areas, and so we're very mindful of that coming into it. And the goal of this mobility plan is to make recommendations that, at the very least, minimize any harm to the environment, but also possibly we can retrofit some things that maybe got built one way decades ago, and we would do it differently today, and we might be able to actually make environmental improvements with some of the projects. And finally, and we're going to talk about this some more, it's really important that you have a mobility plan that identifies your next funding priorities. SR3 was funded in large measure because you had identified it in a community plan earlier, and that matters at the state level. Your legislators, your commissioners can go lobby the legislature all they want, but if there's not a plan that says what the community's priorities are, it's a lot harder to get that funding. And so it's time to go back and revisit that 2003 plan and make sure that we've got the right priorities in there for Belfair today. So talking about the context for Belfair, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but I think it's really important to understand where we're coming from because otherwise it could create some frustration. We're not starting from scratch. We're not starting from a blank slate. This community has a long history of planning. And so we want to talk about how those plans led us to the place where we're at. We're going into them in much more detail than I'm going to do tonight, and so I'm just going to touch on these things. So for some of you, this might be an old review. For others of you, it might be new information, but I think it's really important to share that. For starters, and all I'm going to say is there is a State Growth Management Act, and if you're not aware of it, all you need to know about it is that it's a state law that requires places like Mason County to plan for growth. And if you think about it, if you get past the regulatory part of it, it makes sense. There's certain things that we really love about our community and we don't want them to change over time. We don't want to lose those things. And there are other things that could be better as we grow. And if we don't have a strategy, we have a much harder time achieving that. The Growth Management Act requires Mason County to have that long-range comprehensive plan. And in fact, Mason County is updating that long-range plan right now. So there's a county-wide plan for Mason County, and then there's one specific for the Belfair urban growth area. And so Belfair, as you know, is not incorporated, but it's recognized as an urban place in a rural area. And so it has its own unique needs and priorities that are specific to Belfair. And so that's why there's a sub-area plan. Now, Belfair, way up here in North Mason County, is actually has a very small population. And when we look at what has occurred here and how much growth is expected to occur, if you just look at the population, you go, well, why would they have a lot of transportation problems? Well, the reason why there's so many challenges here is Belfair is right at a crossroads. And so you are the crossroads for traffic coming from the south heading up north, traffic coming in from the Tahuya Peninsula. So there's Belfair really is strategically located, but it does mean you've got that double-edged sword of you get all the benefits that come with that being at that crossroads, but you also get the challenges that come with that as well. And I think transportation is probably one of the most immediate challenges that you have to deal with. So here we are in Belfair. It's a small, local, neighborhood-oriented community, yet it is also a regional crossroads. It is the largest commercial center between Shelton and the Bremerton Gorst area, and the largest economic sort of center for Mason County outside of Shelton. And it's renowned as a recreational gateway to Hood Canal and the Olympic Peninsula. And I think it's really evident in a lot of the themes that seem to characterize development in the Belfair area. So here it is, it's a small local community, but you're dealing with regionally significant issues here, despite the fact that you're just a little over 1,000 in population. And let me ask, before I go any further, I'm kind of curious, how many of you live in Belfair? Can I see just a show of hands of folks who actually live in Belfair? Okay. Oh, yeah, in town, all right, how about on the Tahuya Peninsula, like outside of the town area? Right, most of the rest of you. How about how many of you own businesses in Belfair? Yeah, there are a lot of wonderful little local businesses. Do any of you work in Belfair but you don't have businesses or okay? Yeah, I was just kind of curious because it is such a crossroads, and I know that you probably that you all here are coming from outside of the immediate Belfair area just because of the role that it plays in your lives. So. I had the good fortune to get to work with Mason County last year in developing the transportation plan. So there is a long-range transportation plan that goes with the comprehensive plan. And that long-range transportation plan, when it was adopted, it recommended an update of this transportation element of this Belfair sub-area plan. So that's how we come to be doing this now. And again, you can sort of see the sequence in the planning process. So that sub-area plan was adopted back in 2003. I'm curious if anybody in here worked on that sub-area plan back in 2003. Is anybody in the room who was involved with that? Really terrific. Yeah, that's great. It's talk about continuity and history in the community. So that sub-area plan really set the stage for everything that's happened since. So it had recommendations on land use and how community design, how to create the kind of place that we want Belfair to be. It had recommendations on transportation. It had a whole section on parks and trails and open space and public facilities. That's where I really got the appreciation for the wetland complex and the trails through there. There's a remarkable trail network up here. And then also a section on water quality. So because that plan is still sort of guiding growth and development in Belfair, I think it's important just to hit on a couple of the key things in there because transportation needs to support your land use vision. So that land use vision calls for this center down around the Salmon Center. This is sort of the wetlands complex, lots of biodiversity in that area. That's where the trail network is. You've got that whole gateway to Hood Canal. That's just such a no-brainer right there. And it really is a regional destination. And so that was what was envisioned in that 2003 plan, to really capitalize and highlight those elements of Belfair that are really unique in the south center, the south side of town. Up on the north end, the plan envisions something quite different. So this is where you've got some of the best opportunities for larger scale development, maybe commercial development with bigger footprints. This would be the place where it envisions larger scale multifamily housing going in up there, maybe regional facilities like regional ballparks or something like that. And it's also where you start to have that transition to the industrial uses that are sort of to the north and the west of there. And so this is way up at the north end. And then in the middle is what was sort of defined as a bit of a downtown Belfair. And so mix of uses, more walkable, sort of a lot of thought going into the buildings and how the buildings face the streets so that it makes it comfortable for people to walk from destination to destination. One of my questions to you all tonight is, does this sort of definition of this area does that resonate with you as being downtown? Like what in your minds constitutes downtown Belfair? And maybe this is it, but if it's not, I want to know it so that as we're planning, we're trying to think about Belfair the way the community thinks about it, not the way the consultant team thinks about it. So we really do want to understand your perspectives on this. These three sort of nodes, if you would, on SR3 are connected in that plan by what we call like a mixed-use corridor. So that's a nice way of saying, like, this is where there's a lot more flexibility in design, and market forces are going to be different in different places, and everybody needs to have the opportunity to take the best economic advantage that they can in those areas. So this is sort of this vision of three distinct sort of nodes connected by what was described in that plan as a very green corridor, so heavy emphasis on landscaping as a part of the street edge. So that was what that plan called for in 2003. That plan, in terms of its recommendations, one of the things that has jumped out at me as we've been doing our background research is I have found numerous references at the DOT where they indicated that the reason why this SR3 project was so important to fund was because it showed up in this plan. So, and I know that at the time, from what I understand of talking to people, that was not necessarily an easy sell. I mean, it completely transformed the corridor. You didn't know how you were going to pay for it at the time. It was a very expensive project to even think about including in the plan. But the fact that this community had the vision and said, this, SR3, the way it functions today doesn't work for us long range in the future. We need something different. And because that plan articulated it, I think it really made it possible for the state to hear the elected officials and hear staff. It's like, okay, this isn't just a friend, it's not just the elected officials saying we need this money. The community has said we need this project. And so that's what I'm hoping we find in this update is what are those next projects that need to be identified. Belfair bypass. So Lee got you here. You're probably all here thinking this was all going to be about the Belfair bypass. And I apologize. And I heard a gentleman talking earlier saying that he still doesn't believe it's going to happen. And I have to say that when I saw that the first study that I can point to was done in 1966, and at that time the state was identifying the need for this new corridor, I can totally understand why nobody in this room would believe that there really is money in the state budget to do it. You have heard this over and over and over again. I am here to tell you, and I was asked to tell you this specifically, there is money in the state budget to do the Belfair bypass. That project is going to get started in summer of 2019. You won't see it at first because, like all big projects, there's a lot of stuff that goes on before the bulldozers come out. But they're going to come out, they're going to go back, they do this process where they go back and revalidate their assumptions. There's still some questions about where it ties in on either end. But what's envisioned is a limited access 60-mile-an-hour highway they will acquire enough right-of-way for it ultimately to be 4 lanes, so 2 lanes in each direction, but it will open up as 1 lane in each direction. It will have bike facilities, whether it's on the shoulders or a trail off of it, I don't know. It's also, they will allow up to 2 connections for connectors between the bypass and SR3 so that people can get between that through corridor and downtown. So it'll take about 5 years. Once it gets started, it'll take about 5 years to complete everything. But that project is actually really, it's real money. It's really funded. It's in the next biennium's budget, and it gets started, like I said, in summer of 2019. There'll be engineering, design, property acquisition, permitting, all of that. And they're, at this point, anticipating that they'll be breaking ground by 2022. So, and there should be a lot less construction congestion, because they won't be building right through the middle of town. So we can talk about this some more later. I'm sure people are going to have questions, but it really is, it's a real project. It's really going to happen. And even though I say that, I imagine half of you probably don't believe it. And again, after everything you've heard, I probably wouldn't believe it either. So the Belfair bypass, there have been many, many, many studies associated with it. I think if I could print them all out, they would be well over a foot tall in depth. I mean, there have just been many, many studies. But there was a study done back in 2009 that was anticipating the fact that the bypass was going to be coming. And so Mason County did a 2009 future roads map, because in the sub-area plan, it said, we need more street connections. And so this future roads map was meant to talk about where could those connections go. And they were meant to be viable connections between the bypass and downtown. There's a real strong sense that, especially for property owners who are thinking about developing their property, it'd be really nice to have some predictability. Where does Mason County see the roads going in the future? Because if you do any property development, you have to have multiple ways in and out of the site that you're developing. And if you don't know where the roads are going to be in the future, it makes it really hard to plan. The goal was to give locals a lot more route choice so that you don't always have to go to the same intersection that might be getting all jammed up, and give people different ways of getting around. The intent was to avoid critical areas, and as much as possible to think about where future sewer and water extensions were going to go, because it's a much more cost-effective thing if we can just do everything all at once instead of put the road in and then rip it up to run the sewer and water. So that's what it was intended to do. It didn't go over so well with everybody, and I'll be the very first to say, when it was rolled out to the community, there were some concerns. There were concerns that perhaps they didn't understand that Belfair has some very steep slopes, and so some of the routes sort of didn't seem to be realistic to people. There was a concern that the study sort of disregarded the wetlands in the area, and while it was understood that there would be mitigations when a project actually moves forward, there was concern that, like, wow, but you did just show that connection right through a rich wetland complex with a stream in it. Like, there will never be a road there. Nobody can afford to mitigate that. So that was a legitimate concern. And then there was, coupled with all of that, a question as to whether or not Mason County could actually hope to pay for these projects, because it just seems so ambitious. So those were the criticisms of it. In terms of support, I think it reiterated that Belfair really, really, really wants a bypass. It also reiterated the importance of the SR3 improvements. So again, this was just further underscoring for the state that there was widespread community support for the SR3 project. And then of all the connections that were in there, and I'm curious to see if this comes up tonight in the discussion, of all the potential connections that were in there, the one that seemed to resonate with the most people was the Newkirk connection. So somehow getting Newkirk extended over to SR3 via whether it's Log Yard Road or some other connection, but that was the one connection that seemed to resonate the most with the public. So that is, again, we're aware of that. That's not a blueprint. We're not starting with that as our operating assumption, but we do want to take a look at that and understand the assumptions that went into that and figure out which of those assumptions are still relevant and worth moving forward in the current plan update. A couple of other quick things to hit in terms of context that shapes where we're starting from. Obviously, the SR3 improvements. I don't know how many of you all, I recognize some of you who were out there was it last Thursday? Thursday before, last Thursday, Thursday before. I'm losing track of my time, 2 weeks ago, 2 Thursdays ago, or for the ribbon cutting for SR3. Had to have just been a nightmare to put up with it while it was happening, but I'll tell you, as somebody who has walked the length of it now, and I find people stop for me in the crosswalks, and it's really has made a huge difference and quite the transformation. So that again is an example of what happens when a community can come together around priorities and a plan. Because without that plan, I do not believe that you would have that project that's out there. So this project changes the face of transportation in Belfair, and we want to respond to that and incorporate that in our thinking moving forward. A couple of other quick things. Mason Transit is locating a brand new park and ride facility in Belfair. So in addition to the park and ride at Assembly of God, Mason Transit is in the process of acquiring property up across from Log Yard Road to build a brand new standalone Belfair park and ride lot. And it will be about 100 stalls, is my understanding of it, and that is expected to start construction in summer of 2018, if everything goes as planned. And so the reason why that's so important, and I should be really clear, when I'm talking transportation, I'm talking about all modes of travel. So cars and trucks, yes, but also buses and van pools and carpools. And when we look at travel patterns here, one of the things that really jumps out at us is how many people are commuting up that SR3 corridor to Kitsap County, points beyond. And those are exactly the kinds of trips that tend to do well by carpool or van pool or transit for some of the people who travel some of the time. And so park and ride facilities are really important to make that happen. Like one of the things that we can see is that of the people who live in the Tahuya Peninsula area, including Belfair, over 2,600 of them are commuting out every day to go to work. Of the people who live in that area, only 175 are staying put in that same area and working in that same area. You're also bringing a fair number of jobs in from outside, and I think that could be accounted for not just in Belfair proper, but in the forest lands and all up on the peninsula and the recreational opportunities up there. So park and rides really help support those types of travel needs. One of the things that really jumped out at me is how many people who live in this area are traveling more than 25 miles one way to go to work. So those are trips that, especially when gas prices go up, can be really, really difficult for some people to afford to do. And so again, having a park and ride facility right here in Belfair that will have easy access to SR3 and to the bypass is a really great incentive for more people to try that option and see if transit works for them. Now, I told you that we took some really hard look and learned some things from that 2009 work and other studies that have gone on. So I want to tell you that there's sort of three things that are sort of overarching factors that we know will shape any recommendations that come out of this plan. And I just want to tell you that up front that we know it. One of them is terrain. Belfair is a really steep place. It is. I have somewhere deep in my slide deck here, I have what's called a LiDAR map that shows the contours of the earth without any trees or buildings on them. And the geological formations that are out here underneath all of these trees are just astonishing. That matters, though, because when you're trying to construct in areas where they have steep slopes, it's a very, very expensive construction technique. And so, for example, I know that Romance Hill is sort of a conventional wisdom says Romance Hill is a great connection to the Belfair bypass. So we look at Romance Hill, and it's steep already. It's got 10% grades on it. If you were to try to and this is not the way a road would be planned, but just to show you, to illustrate, if you were to just sort of shoot that road straight on up towards where the bypass would be, you're looking at places where you've got 29% and better grade. You will not get trucks on those roads. You will not have buses on those roads. And you probably have a lot of drivers who aren't going to be comfortable on that either. So those are factors that we have to try to find a way to make these connections without like dealing with 29% grades. The reason how that translates out to project cost is that in some sort of an ideal world where you don't have wetlands and you don't have, if you could just build on the flat, it cost about twice as much to build on a 10% grade as it does to build on the flat. And it's almost 9 times as expensive to build on a 20% slope as it is to build on the flat. And that's because most engineering standards won't, most vehicles are especially if it's an important bypass or a connection to a bypass, going straight up and down is difficult. And so you're going sort of across the hill, and so you're having to shore up on the one side and maybe with structure, and then you're cutting away the hillside on the other. And what I happen to know from looking at some soil studies, you've got some soils out here that in places where you can't cut out of the hill here and fill there, you have to actually replace the soils because of the way that they compress. So this can be really, this can be a very expensive construction technique. So we're going to do our darndest to find routes that allow us to make connections without dealing with things like 21% slopes. One of the things we were looking at for Romance Hill is, could you get from Romance Hill down towards the downtown area, down towards Clifton, so that if people are coming off the bypass, they get sort of funneled back into the commercial district where they can shop at the businesses. So this is going to be a huge challenge for us. I want to be really clear with you that we welcome all the ideas that you have about connections, but just know that at the end of the day, we're going to be looking at terrain very closely, because that's really going to be a factor in whether or not something can be afforded and be funded. If we're talking about a $20 million 1 mile connection, that's going to be a tough project to build. So bear with us as we try to find the feasible routes that we can afford to construct. The other thing about Belfair is that Belfair is very wet, and it's part of that whole quality of Belfair. The southern tip of Hood Canal, all the wetland, the marshes, the lakes, all of that is so beautiful, and it really contributes to the quality of life in a way that I think sets Belfair apart and really helps to make Belfair a unique place. That said, those very same environmental features that we really value are very, very challenging when you're trying to find connections and street connections. And so sometimes it's true, you can build through an environmentally sensitive area, but you're going to pay through the nose for mitigation. So again, that comes back into our thinking about cost and how do the recommendations that we make, how are they going to, how will the environment contribute to the cost of those? And in some places, they're just so sensitive that you really can't afford to be building anything through there, because it would damage the ecosystem. So we're going to try our best. I've been told that the environmental layers of data are not fully up to snuff. We will be very cautious as we work with them. But I want to let you know again, we welcome suggestions for connections and all, but that'll be some of the factors that we bring in as we're evaluating whether something makes sense to send forwards. So the way we're going to do it, we're going to go out. We were going to, naively, I was thinking like, oh, we'll collect traffic counts, like back in the late spring or early summer, but there was just way too much construction stuff still going on. So we're going to wait until after school starts, and then we'll come out and do some traffic counts. We really want to pay attention to how the intersections are operating, because that's really where your transportation system's likely to break first, is around intersections. So we want to understand how traffic is moving on the intersections. Like I said, we're going to do some feasibility analysis, looking at terrain and construction techniques and environmental impacts to see how many of these local connections and bypass connections we can identify for prioritization. We really want to help improve the walkability. Like I said, I've had several people just tell me they wish it was easier to walk between places. They don't feel safe sometimes. And I understand out on more rural roads, but in your downtown area, you should feel totally safe and comfortable walking around. So we want to take a look at that. And then, like I said, this business district strategy, whether it's gateways, making sure that wherever the terminus ends up being for north and south on the bypass, that it's clear to the traveling public that there is this wonderful community. I know you were on the bypass, but you really want to get off here and come down into the business district, and then that business district is welcoming and inviting to them. So that's what we're going to be looking at as we put our recommendations together. We are, if we can pull this off and stay on track, the traffic count sort of threw us back a little bit, but I'm hopeful we can still do this, is have a draft plan for review late this year, make refinements to it, and get it to the Board of County Commissioners for adoption very early in the year. So that we're asking for a chunk of your time, but it's sort of compressed right in here, and we're not going to drag this out for a year and a half. Part of that is so that you can have clarity about what Belfair's mobility priorities are before the state starts looking at what it's going to do in summer of 2019. If you already have your plan in place, it's much easier for the state to respond to that and accommodate that, as opposed to the state goes and does their thing, and then Belfair is running after going, but wait, we want to have this, and we want to have this. So, getting clarity on those right up front makes it much more likely that they will be able to be accommodated as the state goes forwards with its plans. Engagement. As I said to begin with, the commissioners and public works staff they just said this is a community that's going to be really interested in what you're doing. Looking at this room tonight, it's clear that they were not exaggerating. We have a variety of ways that we want to keep you involved throughout. We are doing sort of a rolling series of, I'm calling them one-on-one or really small group interviews, talking with community leaders and with subject matter experts and property owners and system operators, and to try to understand the issues and the opportunities from their vantage point, and critique ideas and all of that. We're going to have this meeting tonight, obviously, and at least one more near the end of the process where you can kind of pick our stuff apart and challenge our assumptions and vote for the things that you think are the most important. But in between now and then, we're going to be coming back to you frequently for your input. We're going to try some things where we appreciate that everybody's busy, and especially once school gets started and the days get shorter, it gets to be harder and harder to come together for meetings. And we're not sure we always need to have everybody together for a meeting, when sometimes we just need input on a little thing. So we're going to try using some like electronic polling, internet queries, or surveys, to test some ideas, test messages, test design concepts with you, so that you can do it in the comfort of your own home, or at the library, or at your leisure, instead of trying to come and meet my schedule and be here because I'm going to be here at 7, so you better be here at 7. I just think I think this could work. I'll be right up front and say it's a little bit of an experiment, but what we found over the years is, as we do community processes, we'll sometimes have a lot of people show up for the first meeting, but then it gets to be fewer and fewer, and it's just they're busy. We all have a lot of things we're trying to juggle, so we're trying to figure out how to make it as easy as possible to participate. And so if we've got an email address, or Lee has assured me we can use his email distribution list to get information out and ask questions of you, and give you a link that you can click on and then answer these 3 questions for us and take that much time. That's how we're going to try to do a lot of this outreach. Of course, we will be having briefings, regular briefings with the commissioners, and with the tip cap and the PAC. Excuse me. We're also, and I unfortunately I don't have the address for you tonight, but we're also doing a project website, so that you can come in one location, easy to find. It'll have an easy address, something like, don't write this down yet because we haven't secured it yet, but something like belfairmobility.org or something like that, so that you can come to one place, find out what's going on. You can, if you want to look at any of these reports or studies that have been done over the last 20 years, we'll have links to those up there so you can take a look at them. I'll tell you, we had to really dig to find some of these things, so I wanted to make it easier than that for you to find some of these. And the schedule and any information that we know of about the project, we'll have it all in one place so that you can find it and not have to hunt and peck through the regular county website. Just put it right out there as easy as possible for you to get. So again, we'll hopefully have that address up and running by next week. As soon as we have it, again, we'll push it out through the email distribution list so that you'll know how to find this information. So this is just about the end of the talking head part of this, the one-way exchange of information. And we're getting ready to move into the part where there's some more back and forth dialogue. I am pretty sure a lot of you came in tonight with a bunch of questions and ideas and comments. I want to seed some other questions for you, though, to think about, because I'm curious about these things, and I can't think of a better group of people to help me understand this. So some of the things I'm curious about, one of the things I was thinking about as I was walking up and down SR3 is how it has changed. And so I'm kind of curious from your perspectives, how has how does travel, how has it changed? How has traffic changed? Transportation, is it all better? Did any problems move somewhere where you weren't expecting them? Or I'm just kind of curious how this this whole transformation of SR3 has worked for you. I'm kind of curious. So whether you believe it or not, there really will be a bypass coming, and you've gotten the SR3 project done. So I'm curious tonight in learning what you all think are some of the most important transportation problems that are facing Belfair right now. So that can shape our thinking. We'll be listening for this and looking for solutions and strategies as we go forward. I'm also curious, it struck me as I was walking around, I thought, the folks who live here, who are the ones, you guys who are the ones who are trying to walk in these close-in or more downtown center areas, what opportunities are there? Are there like logical routes or pathways that we should be paying attention to that maybe as the newcomer to Belfair right now, I might not be aware of it, but if I had lived here for the last 15 years, I would know that these are some really logical pathways that everybody takes. So, and that would be a great thing if you wanted to draw that on this map. I'm also curious, a lot of people are skeptical about plans and planning processes. So I want to just, about the plan itself, I'm kind of curious what sort of fears or concerns you might have about this plan. And so if you have any, you really, whatever else you do, I really hope this plan doesn't do this thing. I'd love to know what that is. And by the same token, I'm curious, if 5, 7, 10, 15 years from now, we look back on this plan and it worked, it was a good plan for Belfair, what would that look like? What would that measure of success? How will you know in the future if this was a good plan and a good planning process? So those are some of the things I'm kind of curious about that, from if I could ask you questions, those are some of the questions I would ask. But with that, I think I'm going to just sort of stop. I'm going to go back to that slide, but I do want to just make sure, especially for the video part of this, that the contact information goes up there. I want to make sure that everybody knows if you have any questions about this plan, the planning process, anything, you can get in touch with either Loretta Swanson or Dave Smith with Public Works at Mason County. Their contact information is up there. Or you can get in touch with me. And we communicate regularly, so if you've got questions, issues, please feel free to get in touch with us. Shoot us an email whenever you think about it, and that's fine. We don't have to be in the office. So definitely get in touch with us. I'm going to go back to the question slide, but I'm going to pull this one back up here again before we're all done. So I think with that, I'm going to stop my ramble and turn it over to you for your thoughts, your ideas, your questions, your aspirations, your fears, whatever you have.
All right. I think everybody could probably take a quick stand up and stretch for 10, 15 seconds, and then we can get right to it.
Oh, I'll be the first. will say these are very comfortable chairs.
Ready for the first question? All right.
There's Elizabeth.
I mentioned the other Mary
Oh,
Jo Katie.
yeah.
And this is our property here.
Yeah.
That stream does not
All right, if we
exist.
can-
We were
Good.
down at community development and told them that
We
today.
can make our way back to our
and Michael
chairs, please.
McSims
Oh, yeah.
agreed with us. He says,
Good.
yeah, that it's over here somewhere. It's maybe this one.
Got it.
That
Okay.
one doesn't exist.
Good to know. Thank you.
All right, I know that I got like a ton of questions, but I'm the moderator, so I'm getting asked it like regular. I'm sitting here thinking, okay, as long as this project doesn't extend and it costs us lots more money. But you guys, with your questions, and what's your name? Elizabeth will be our roving mic. We'll bring them to you. Did you already have something set up? Okay, we'll get it started around, but please remember, give us a chance for everybody to go, so keep it under 2 minutes, whether it's a comment or a question. Really appreciate you guys, so please.
Okay. You've probably already done the study and know what the slope is of the land when the hill's back over. Well, all I can do is talk. You know what the slope is, and you know most realistically where the path is going to come down from there. Who pays for that? Is that the county paying for that, or is that the state?
For connecting
Yeah, yeah.
route, right now it's the state says it will be a local project, so the county would be paying for
And
that.
they're going to go over top of the Navy Yards Railroad?
That is my understanding, and I've yet to meet with the Navy Railroad people. My understanding is that an at-grade crossing is not possible, but if we can work a deal, we would love to.
Okay.
But
It
it's
almost doesn't seem realistic. I've
It's,
worked in
we're
public
assuming, no, we're
utilities.
assuming,
Yeah.
we're looking at it with bridges, with either a structure over or, there are a couple of places where the track goes sort of below grade a little bit, and so you could actually do a bridge structure without having to do a lot of abutments.
But coming down the hill, what's the most likely spot right there on the grade? Because you said some of it's 29% and then 10%, which 29 is just insane. But,
Yeah. Well, and
like-
what we would look to do, so just so everybody knows, when we go to find these alignments, what we'll do is we've got a couple of different software programs that didn't even exist in 2009 when they did this. So we'll be able to strip away the tree cover and the buildings and go and look right at it's using LiDAR maps and follow the contours. So I would be stunned if there is a connection that's just a straight shot. I think you're going to have something that's going to follow the ridge lines and then find a way down. I really genuinely do not have an answer in my back pocket on that one. That's what we're just digging into.
And just one more and then I'm done.
Yeah.
Are they going to change the entrance and exits that they had from 2009?
For the bypass?
Yes.
I think so. They're going to go back in and what they say revalidate. For the north end, they seem to be rather enamored with the connection at Lake Flora Road. That they seem to feel that that's pretty solid. I will say on the south end, their preferred alternative on for the bypass would go through part of the North Mason athletic field and the stadium and take out like some classrooms. So those were not built when they did their study, and those are extremely difficult properties for any transportation project to go through. So my hunch is that they will have to reconsider what happens on the south end. You know where that ties in at the south end. What the state will tell you right now is everything is preliminary. They will finalize it when they do this in 2019. But they've got a lot of ideas. I mean, they've done a lot of work on this and a lot of research. They've got 67 million. I think 67 million. How far they can stretch that? I mean, you can't really slim anything down, and you can't say like, oh, we'll just build the two ends and cut it out in the middle. It won't work. So it's
2009, wasn't the bill 72 million? So
Yeah,
they
I think it was
actually
higher.
put in less money?
yeah,
than-
I think the dollar amount, I could be mistaken. I believe it's 67. Is it 67 million? Yeah.
67.
Yeah. So it's there were a lot of hands out for money in that bill. So
Thank you.
I'm just wondering, when they built the new roads down here in town on SR3, did they take into consideration that the elementary school is down there? I come up 106 to come into town, and twice a day, that is horrendous when school is in session. And the SR3 construction stopped right there. And I'm just wondering if that's going to be taken into consideration when you do the connectors.
I'm not 100% sure that it'd be taken into consideration on the connectors, but I'll tell you what, if SR3 needs to be finished, this plan better say that SR3 needs to be finished. And so for my question for you is, around the school there, is the issue one of vehicles mixing it up with students, crossing, or is it just a traffic congestion trying to get in and out?
It's vehicles trying to get in, the
Okay.
parents picking up kids from school, the school buses, everything.
Good.
It's horrendous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First, I want to say thank you for doing this late enough in the evening that those of us work way too far away from here can actually be here.
Good.
The next thing is, one of the things you mentioned was ongoing issues. And I haven't lived here for a very long time, about 5 years. But actually, it's that intersection right there. It's got to be the worst intersection in Belfair. A traffic circle or a traffic light or something. It is a very regular occurrence to see crashes or near crashes because people just don't understand four-way stops.
Yeah. And can I ask you, one of the things that struck me is the way, like tonight even, when we were turning left off of SR3 and turning onto 300 there, it's sort of a weird angle, It's like you're turning and you're not 100% sure where you're aiming for. Is that just because I'm not that familiar, or is this?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And the other thing I would say, I've definitely seen a major improvement now that SR3's been, the construction's done and the road is open. My standard was you don't go into Belfair on Friday night coming home from work. It's just you don't do it because you'd be backed up way past the county line. And I came in Friday, and it took me maybe 3 minutes from the railroad tracks to the light.
Wow.
And that's very good. On a Friday afternoon, that's perfect. So.
Yeah, and even in the summertime too, right? Because you probably have a lot of tourist traffic going through on the evenings, heading out to or they used to. Okay.
Thank you.
Wow, thanks.
I know you had the one ending off-ramp, whatever you want to put it, at the end. How come those aren't listed on the map, your different proposals? And what is your other alternatives besides the ones that we've seen prior, 2003, 2009, way back? I've been around since 2002, not as long as some of them, but I'm really concerned because they keep saying this spot, and both of them seem to be fairly close to our neighborhood or through it. And you said one of them is possibly through the new high school field.
Well, and they won't, because.
So then where, do you know where the other alternatives, or do we have any idea? Because it's really hard to get on board with something when you don't know how it's going to affect us.
I understand, and let me see if I can pull this up really quick. So the reason why we're not looking at the terminal points ourselves is because it's the state highway project, and it's their decision. And honestly, our boundary is sort of the urban growth area for Belfair, and right now what the state is proposing, the 2 terminal points would be outside of that. This is what the state, this area, that stadium was not there when the state developed its plan. Was it? Okay. So then they did it with, because when in their plan it said that they had said something about there was about to be some construction there and that this could close this off. Okay. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Yeah, it's, you get into Section 4F environmental issues when you start hitting school properties. And so I obviously am not here to speak for the state. I will tell you, they will do everything they can to avoid that property because that is going to be a real problem. Now, what I will show you is that when Mason County looked at where a logical connection might be back in the late 90s, they were looking sort of on the other side, sort of, you know, if you think about like where the bus barn is, somewhere in that area or west of there. So I think if the state approaches this like they approach other ones, they're going to go back in, they'll start off with sort of going back and looking at the old studies and revalidating the old assumptions. And I think there will be some discussion about where these two endpoints come in. So, and one of the things, as soon as any information is known that they're getting ready to start that process, we can help get that word out to everybody so you'll know that that's getting started. Yeah, that the community is really interested in this, and if you could maybe have that conversation before 2019, folks here might like that.
Question for you that I think in your presentation you said, and please confirm, that Romance Hill Road is completely off the table as a connector road.
It is not completely off
Okay.
the table as a connector road.
Okay.
So do you have
Unless
feelings about
there-
that?
Unless there is major construction, that is unsafe. Those of us that live up there know where the bad spots are, where the ice spots are, and you will put a car. And when you do that, you'll have lawsuits.
Mm-hmm.
And I will be right there helping support that person when he sues the state.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, we've done all of this nice work on Highway 3. Why can't we have a flashing yellow turn signal at the corner right up here at Safeway? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Every place else has got them now, but not us.
Yeah, so that it's called a permissive turn, and so yeah,
Permissive
that's
turn,
good,
yeah.
yeah.
And the other thing is that I came down, coming back from Bremerton, and I was trying to get home to watch the Seahawks game, okay, on Friday. And I hit it at, the traffic stopped at the gravel pit. It took me 20 minutes to get to Romance Hill Road. So we have not helped ourselves a lot because the backup, we've done a great job with the turn lanes, but it needs to extend down to where we turn off for the South Shore, that stoplight.
Yeah,
You're going
so all the way down
to
to,
have those kind of backups until you finish that section of road.
and this is, can I clarify, this is what, and you spoke about up front, this is what they're calling phase 3, right? Okay, so, yeah. Phase 2, okay. Mm-hmm.
Oh, now the questions are gone.
But
here.
here.
As far as just the connecting points, dropping off the bypass into Belfair, if we're just looking at purely traffic alone and nothing else, not geographic, not future business proposals or anything else, traffic goes three ways. All the way through town, it drops down the North Shore, which is Clifton Road, and it drops down 106. So if it doesn't hit Clifton Road and 106, then it's not really just affecting traffic, it's for some other purpose. As far as the improvements on the 3 right now, that everything was done, it didn't really change much. It gave us sidewalks, curbs, and gutters so that you can walk down the side of the road and look at the traffic that's still there. Nothing really changed.
Okay.
It does need to extend all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And with the improvements, it actually made the intersection at Clifton Road a little worse. Not too long ago, Taco Bell came in, and right when you turn off Highway 3 onto Clifton Road, you're allowed to take a left across traffic into Taco Bell. which is dangerous and ridiculous.
Is it even possible? I
Not
tried to
very
turn
often,
left
but
out of
people do
Safeway and
stop
I
there
couldn't do
back
that either.
traffic all the way up onto the highway right now.
Wow.
And then, yeah, coming out, you're allowed to take a left again to cross traffic, which that should be eliminated altogether. And then Safeway went and put a right turn lane, right turn only, out of their parking lot onto the highway. I can see it's for safety, but it put 100% of the burden of all their traffic onto the intersection of Clifton Road.
Yeah.
That was not wise either. And then just something that's a little off topic, but I think much needed in this town is we have Belfair State Park down the road. That there's people that ride bikes and walk all the time on that road. And it's dangerous. There's absolutely no way to have foot traffic on that road safely right now when people are doing it.
And that's getting to the park, to and from the park?
Between
Is
the
it
park and Belfair.
between there, okay.
There should be some sort of walking path, bike path. That would just be a huge thing for us to do.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. In the back.
I would hate to delay this project any, but you said you're going to start traffic counts pretty soon. If you're trying to define where some traffic flow issues would be, to do it in the middle of November versus the middle of July, just from a subjective standpoint, it's probably going to be about half the traffic that's normally here in the summertime. So just
Beware. Gotcha.
Two things. One, we've already kind of discussed the phase 2 process. That is a huge thing that needs to be funded. I believe that personally, I believe that would be a little bit more help than the bypass. And second of all, those of y'all that are coming from the Allen area in the morning, you see the kids walking up the hill from 106 up the hill to go to the high school. Probably the most unsafe thing. We need to have some sort of sidewalk put in from where phase 3 ends. It should be a sidewalk completely, the whole thing, phase 3, phase 2, the Highway 3 widening has no sidewalks. It should have sidewalks as part of that, as well as a sidewalk on one side or the other going all the way up the hill, Highway 3 up to the high school so the kids can walk safely in the morning, because a lot of kids wear black in the morning, and for the last 10 years I've traveled back and forth to Tacoma and leaving different times, and the kids, you can't see them until a lot of times you're running on top of them, and just for their safety.
Mm-hmm.
In a longer lane. The turn lane there at 106 needs to be much longer than probably what they have anticipated. It needs to be further back, almost past JR's, even further around the corner there, just because maybe the habitat, just to help alleviate the problem in the afternoon, like the one lady back here said about the kids in school and stuff. I think that would help too.
Okay, thank you.
Just a couple comments. One, I'd like to really say I'm thankful that the construction is finally over after
We're just like,
yay!
yay!
Years coming down Romance Hill Road, and sitting there and then bumpity all over the place.
Yeah.
Like my counterpart down there, it's taken us every bit on a Friday afternoon or Thursday afternoon when the traffic starts for most of us, 45 minutes to get from the top of the hill to the top of Romance Hill where we live. And one of the things I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of, there have been, I won't say multiple, but there have been other committees chartered by the commissioners. I think there is a local transportation committee. I think, Randy, what the name of it is?
Oh, the tip cap. Yeah.
Okay. Anyhow, I know I was on a community sewer advisory committee. We worked for like 2.5 years, something like that. And I know that part of that time frame that this committee, the Transportation Committee, has been in operation, and I would hope that you would have a dump of something from them before you go off, okay?
Yeah.
And just a comment on the left turn lane. I get a kick out of it. We are a bedroom community for Kitsap County, and we don't seem to want to recognize that, but we are. I think your numbers speak to that, as you said earlier. So that means between the hours of, say, 5:30 in the morning to, a wild ass guess, 8 o'clock, okay? The bulk of the traffic is going...
Where's it going?
Anyhow, the bulk of the traffic is headed towards Kitsap County. And so at that hour of the morning, I really doubt that there's a lot of people wishing to turn left, okay? And the reverse is true on the way home. They're coming back through our community and traveling out 106, whatever, and out North Shore. And there's a limited number of left turners there too. They're going to stop at the grocery stores, et cetera, which are where? Oh, all on the right-hand side. So I'm not too sure if we were really smart to do what we did in the first place, as opposed to putting our eggs in one basket. We could have been working on a bypass several years ago.
Are there any plans to modify or fix Highway 300 coming onto Highway 3? Because that backs up traffic. That is our problem. Now we got 3 lanes, and people can figure out how they can pass a bus going the other direction, maybe.
Yeah.
Then 300 backs up traffic. Is there any plans to deal with that at all?
I think it's probably going to be in this mobility. I'm not aware of something, but this is. I'll just say, as somebody who doesn't live here, as I've spent time in the community and traveled around and looked at things, that's the intersection that really jumps out at me. It's almost that intersection, Clifton, and this one right down. It's almost like there's this triangle, and I can't figure out. I want to observe it some more, but yeah, it seems like there needs to be something at that intersection.
If they were to take Clifton Road and make that 300 and block that off down there, they would have a light, a green light, a red light, green light, red light, so everybody can get down through Highway 3. There's no reason to have Highway 3 ending right there.
Right.
Not that I can think of.
Yeah. Yeah, so are you sort of saying then, like, Highway 3 should actually go all the way to the signal at... Yeah.
Versus turning there and then blocking much traffic.
Yeah. I was just waiting to hear that, so thank you. Because it did not make sense to me either.
I wanted to say something positive about what they've done to Highway 3. They have now a middle lane, so if we have emergency vehicles, at least they can go down the middle lane. And I live in Golden Bell, at least I can get out and get into the middle lane to get over. So there is positive, and sidewalks are positive. So there are a lot of positives. Good. So remember that.
Okay.
Two things. One of the things that I've seen about traffic is traffic used to flow pretty good even when they put the light up here at Clifton until they put the other light down at 106. The traffic backs up real bad because they're not synchronized, and it becomes a real big hazard. The other thing that I would like to see, especially with this intersection up here, some sort of traffic signals that have the opticoms and on Highway 3 for both law enforcement and fire. I know our fire guys have a heck of a time, especially with this intersection up here, and then when traffic's blocked off on Highway 3 and Clifton and the little bypass there is just terrible.
Does everybody know what the opticoms are? Those are the little devices that there would be something in the fire engine or the police car and then up on the signal, and it'll start flashing, and then it'll give them the priority coming through, as opposed to them just crossing their fingers and hoping that everybody's going to stop for them. It's a good suggestion.
Hey, good evening, Belfair. Hey, my name is Rick Calvin. I'm a North Mason resident. I currently live off the Grapeview Loop Road. And I transit through here a minimum 2 times a day. I shop here, I use services, I recreate, socialize. I really enjoy Belfair. I've been here about 17 years, and one of the things that really, and I'm pretty sure I'm not alone, is the character of our area. I mean, this is a rural, recreational, service-oriented corridor. It's a great community. I just look at around today. I mean, this is why I like living in a town like this. I think the bypass is going to bring us a lot of opportunity, but I think we need to really recognize too that it's going to bring more growth, which is not a bad thing, but I think we really need to think kind of hard about how that growth is going to impact our community. So one of the things I kind of look at is when I look at the Mason County Comprehensive Plan, I look at the sub-area plans, the UGAs, what I don't really see a lot of discussion about is what you call design review. It's a design review strategy. So to give you kind of a quick backdrop, if you're not familiar with it, a comp plan will pretty much deal mostly with a lot of issues, but when it comes to community building and how things look, it's about density, it's about zoning, use areas, and what design review does is really kind of builds the character of the area. So we live in a rural area. We have a really good start. We have a lot of buildings that are new in town that kind of fit a character of the town. We have a lot of older structures that fit a historical perspective and fit in the town. And I guess the best way to put it in my mind is my nightmare is one morning I wake up and I'm driving down Silverdale Way. And that's not appealing. That's what I don't think most people come out here. So growth is good, but we really need to be thinking about that. And that's just one thing I don't see in the plans. And I think people are scared because they're afraid about telling you what you're going to build. But as a community, we do have a voice if it's important to us. So that's kind of all I wanted to say. It's important to me. I hope we consider that in the future as we move forward. That what do we want our town to look like and how to live.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have two comments. One is on Route 3. It does look awful pretty. The one problem I have is they built some cliffs along the side, like where the sheriff's building is. There's a drop off of 15 feet. And I brought that up during their planning cycle that they need to make sure there isn't an accident where a car's going to go over that edge right into the building. They assured me that they will take care of that. Nothing will be able to go over. That beautiful black little fence is not going to stop a car. And the other problem with that beautiful black little fence is, try coming up from the sheriff's office on the driveway in a passenger car, not in a big SUV, and that fence impairs your vision. You cannot see the oncoming traffic until your bumper is out across the white line into traffic. So I've already sent an email to Michelle asking her to take a look at that. But that's a serious problem that I can see. Different topic, State Route 300, Union River Bridge. That is a wooden structure. It's an old bridge. One of these days, it's going to go away. They need to do plans where there is a second bridge already built some other way around that. If that bridge goes away, that everybody on the North Shore isn't stuck. And that's a state highway going through the state park, plus the DNR land with the ORV areas.
Great, thank you.
I just had a question. Earlier in your discourse, you were talking about 1 to 2 offshoots. Okay?
Connectors, right?
Why?
Why would you want them?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
they're at the top of the hill here, and they're at the other end. If you don't know you're going to go to town, don't get on the bypass.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
how
think,
simple
yeah.
can it be?
I think that the concern is that if there's not a way to get from the bypass to town, like bypasses can be very effective, and there's some communities that have learned the hard way that
At the
if you,
expense of who?
Of the local, it's about the local businesses.
No,
You know.
What I'm saying is there's what, 50,000 people in Mason County or something like that? It's a very unpopulated county.
Right.
Very poor. We're having trouble with a sewer system in this neck of the woods that's pricing us right out of house and home. And now they want to put in egress to a bypass at the same people's expense. The question of why, just because is not a good answer.
Yeah, it's more for, it is intended to help support the economic vitality of the community. And sometimes the only thing worse than too much congestion is no traffic at all. You know, so for local businesses, just to make sure. And I think that you have a lot of good population. You know, the folks who live on the peninsula have no choice but to come through Belfair. Even if they want to go to the bypass, they're coming through Belfair. But for the traffic coming up from the south, that, you know, would perhaps...
Right on Highway 3 and come up. We're here.
Yeah, no, and that would...
Don't have to do anything.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
stay right on 101 and go right into town. Get your ice cream cone and then move on down the road.
Loretta.
The other reason we've heard in the past also is to be able to provide at least closer emergency access.
Yeah.
So if you're on the connector or the bypass, you've got a long way around one way or the other. So
makes sense
that
too.
is another reason that we have heard.
And we're going to have to start wrapping it up, so get your questions ready because we're going to do a lightning round, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
One of the things that came up in the past is currently there's no way in or out except one way. And if there's a forest fire, say up by Chris's house, everybody's trying to get out. The people that live on that hill would have no way of getting out. If there was a problem at the school and there's traffic both ways, you couldn't get the kids out. You've got to have a different way to access that stuff. It's just not feasible to keep it just a one-way in and out kind of an option, especially with the traffic we're going to have. And back in the 90s, I was working on this whole thing, and Jerry Howe at the time told us that the amount of traffic that you have when the project starts going through Belfair is going to be the same amount of traffic going through Belfair when the bypass is done, just because of the increase in traffic. So it's not going to diminish what's coming into Belfair, but it'll take all that extra growth and everything past. So that's part of it.
Thank you.
Polarizing term in this area is roundabout. I hear people talking in very positive terms about roundabouts. I also talk to people who don't seem to understand how simple they are and don't want to learn. Do you think there's applications for roundabouts in this area?
I'll just say, me personally, true confessions, I love roundabouts. And I think the law enforcement folks and the medical folks I've worked with say they've never had to use the jaws of life to get anybody out of a roundabout crash. You know, and they work when the power's out. We seem to have difficulty learning how to use them, but maybe we had difficulty learning how to use traffic signals when they were first introduced. I'm not really sure, but it's... I think that they're here to stay. They're absolutely a priority for the state. I've worked on a few state projects where if you wanted to put in something other than a roundabout, you had to defend it, and you ran the risk of not getting your intersection because they're that much safer and they're remarkably more efficient. And I've worked with a lot of people who have been this far from my face telling me how much they hate roundabouts, and over my dead body, will you put one in? And then they've come back later and said, okay, it was actually, I figured it out and it's quite all right. So, yeah.
Regarding a roundabout up here, one thing you want to take in account of is that there's a lot of RVs going through there, going out to the state park. It's going to have to be pretty large.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing.
How about logging trucks? I would imagine you've got some logging trucks coming in and out of there too. Yeah. Yep.
Gravel trucks.
Yeah.
All that.
Yeah, we actually, I mean, one of the things that if a roundabout is the right fix, and there are a lot of reasons why a roundabout would not be the right fix beyond just sentiment, but If a roundabout is the right fix, one of the things that the engineers will do is try to understand the traffic flow and the vehicle characteristics, like you're describing with RVs and gravel trucks and logging trucks, and they can design them in such ways that for the cars, it doesn't. It might be a really large footprint, but they're really designed for those large vehicles coming through, and that truck apron in the middle is made a little bit longer. We're designing one right now down in South Thurston County to allow pole trucks to go through, and they're hauling 125-foot long poles. And what I will say, what the truck drivers told me, because the owner of the business was really nervous, and the drivers, the owner of the trucking company said, he said, we've seen roundabouts now. We're used to them. Their biggest concern are cars, because what will happen is cars will try to cut on the inside of them, not knowing that they're making that big wide sweep. So the issue isn't really with the trucks; it's with drivers who are trying, who don't understand how trucks work, who are trying to, cut the corner on them. But he said there's no problem, So, but you're right; it would have to be reflected in the footprint, the design, and I appreciate reminding me that you do have a lot of RVs coming through.
One other thing about exits to the new bypass and the problem that we're having with the sewer system. Yeah. My thought is that we need more growth up on that hill to be able to account and to add additional input to that sewer system. Problem is that we don't have enough people on the sewer system, and trying to get existing residents on it and place them with a $15,000, $10,000 bill or whatever it is to tie in is a real hard sell. We really need some growth, controlled growth in the area to be able to help pay for that.
And transportation can absolutely be the key for that for you.
When will the website be up?
I may be over-promising, but I'm hoping by the end of next week. That's what I would like to have. I mean, as soon as possible.
How do we find that out?
Lee said that he would send the notice out to everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Earlier you said that if there's no community consensus, there wouldn't be a plan. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate on that more?
Yeah, well,
why is it important for us to, why is it important to have a consensus?
Well, consensus and agreement, and I want to be careful. I don't want to make it sound like it's not okay to have differing viewpoints. And if I implied that, I apologize because I didn't mean to. It's okay to have differing viewpoints, but if there is general agreement from the community about what its priorities are, that is a platform from which people can go find grant funding. If you don't have that commitment, that agreement. I mean, that sub-area plan, that 2003 sub-area plan is really powerful in that regard. It was very much a community-driven planning process. And so those types of plans, for the state agencies, you got to know, it's not like they're sitting on pots of money going, we've got all this money, we're just not going to give it. There's so much more demand for money than what they have to award. And so when they're trying to prioritize, it's those projects that come up out of a community-oriented process that tend to float to the top, as opposed to something that I came up with over the weekend and I'm going to go try to find money for it for my community. It just doesn't have the same kind of standing as a project that's identified, even if the project name isn't the right, but if like for the SR3 project, this community identified what it needed in the way of SR3 infrastructure to fit the character of the community, and that's all they needed. They could run with it from there. But that's what I mean by this, is figuring out what those priorities are. There'll be some, I'm going to be stunned if there aren't things that people disagree on in the plan, but as long as the big important things, that there's general agreement, that's what we're striving for.
We'll have to be, this up here, final comment tonight. Please go ahead.
I think that he was waiting, so just these two.
Oh, these will be our last two comments.
I remember there was a gas tax that was charged to the people here, and can you tell us what happened to that money?
Sure. Yeah, so you're talking about so there have been several gas tax increases. So
For the bypass.
Yeah, and so the bypass is actually being funded out of that Connecting Washington funding package. It was passed, I'm going to say, in 2015. I don't know, the years start to blur together. But that was a big part of sort of this moving forward. There was there was a 9-cent tax increase, and then the 5.5-cent tax increase, or nickel and a 9.5 cent. I get them mixed up now, but they're so far in the past. But that is part of the funding for this. And what they're doing, what the state does is it uses those gas tax revenues to pay off bonds, and so they're issuing bonds in big rolling things, because all across the state there's a backlog of need. If you knew how transportation was paid for, you'd be amazed that the system works as well as it does. It is a wacky way to pay for something as essential to us as transportation, but no general fund monies go. It's all it's gas tax revenue. And so right now, what is the rate up to? 23. I'm gonna get it wrong. It's been a while since I've thought about it. 40. That sounds right. Yeah, 23 sounds more closer to the federal. Yeah, so it's up in the 40s. And just so everybody knows, when you pay gas tax revenue at the pump, when you're paying your gas tax, it does not go to general funds. It does not go to schools. It doesn't go to parks and recreation. It is required under. It's what? Trains. Actually. It does. It's actually restricted to transportation purposes, and not even just any transportation. Like, you cannot build standalone bike lanes with gas tax revenue. It needs to have a motor vehicle connection associated with it. So there are rumors out there perpetually that they're siphoning off the gas tax revenue for some other pet projects. That's against the law in Washington State. So.
We didn't use this time, someone just said, that it went to 520.
I'm not sure which. Are you talking about a funding package from a bunch of years ago then? Yeah, I couldn't tell you. I can try and track down what happened to the original funding package for it, but I didn't. My thinking was that it was not fully funded back then. So, again, if you can't build half a bypass, it's
Right,
it's.
We spent the money, so where did it go? People asked us, and somebody else just said that it went to 520.
Oh, it might have. The state's constantly moving monies around, so it wouldn't surprise me. It's. Is there one more? Okay.
Yeah, one last.
Yeah.
You talked about the growth in Belfair, potential growth. Gentleman over here talked about we need to have growth. I'm the president of the Clifton Ridge Homeowners Association. I've got 5 lots up there that cannot be built on because of the edict of the county commissioners that you must directly hook up to the sewer system. We have no access to the sewer. Everybody up there has their own biokinetic septic systems, but because of the edict of the county commissioners, we can't build up there. And so there can't be any growth in Belfair until you can directly, in the UGA, until you can directly hook up to the sewer system.
I would check on that also, because I believe that actually just recently changed.
Yeah, is that that was the thing you just lifted?
Obviously a little bit different from our conversation, but I believe that if you're inside the UGA and you're not in an area that has sewer. Sorry, I believe that has been adopted, a change has been made for that, where if you're in an urban growth area and your sewer is not yet available, that there is an opportunity to put in a septic system for your existing home. So I would check up on that. I believe it's happened within the last month maybe. So, we good? Well, that we'll have to. Sure, Randy, would you explain that?
Yes, we had a public hearing. It took us a long battle to be able to do it with a little help down Olympia. That law is now changed. We no longer have a total moratorium on Belfair, so for the first time ever, we can start to build again. When they do build, if it's something new, they have to be able to build it with the idea that it will eventually be hooked up when the sewer comes up to it, so they have to put that infrastructure in the ground for it. But yes, no, that's all changed, and there's a lot more property up on top of that hill though than yeah.
For my system. And the sewer came up next year, I gotta throw that 20 to 30,000 away and hook up to the sewer system. I know, but I feel pretty good, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah, they're gonna have, that's better than dumping it every week by somebody.
All right, we're out of time this evening, you guys. Thank you so very much for coming.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.